We seem to have global reach. We have a huge number of people coming to the UK to participate in the KTP programme. That means we're attracting some of the best talent globally to work on these thorny problems, these applied problems. That's worth thinking about in the bigger scheme of things. Yeah.
Hello, and welcome to the Partnerships podcast series by UIIN. I'm Sarah Jabber, Director at UIIN, and your host for today. For this episode, I spoke with Richard Lamb, Program Manager for Knowledge Transfer Partnerships at Innovate UK, about one of the UK's longest-running innovation instruments. For 50 years, KTP has embedded university expertise directly into businesses to solve strategic challenges and build lasting capability. We unpacked what makes the model distinctive, the pivotal role of the associate in bridging academia and industry, and what other countries can learn from the UK's experience in structured, impact-driven collaboration. For those of you who are familiar with KTPs, they are one of the UK's longest-running innovation instruments, originally launched in the 1970s and still operating at scale today. Over the past decade alone, evaluations have indicated that KTP has generated billions in net economic value and consistently high returns relative to public investment. And what makes it especially interesting isn't just, I'd say, the funding, but the model and the way it's designed around capability building and collaboration. So to unpack how this works in practice and what has happened over the last 50 years of KTP, I'm really happy to be joined by Richard Lamb. So Richard is the Program Manager for KTP at Innovate UK, a role he's held since 2018, but he brings more than 15 years of cross-sector experience across higher education, climate policy, public service, and innovation management. At Innovate UK, he champions programs that connect research, business, and talent to drive long-term impact. Richard, great to have you with us.
Thank you very much.
And just to kick off this conversation, knowledge transfer partnerships, as I said, they're a UK innovation instrument. Maybe you can tell us a little bit around the origin of KTP. What was the problem that it was originally designed to solve? Yeah. What is it? And what makes it different to a standard collaboration grant?
KTP has just celebrated its 50th anniversary. We have done a little bit of digging, but going back in time is always challenging. But what we know is that in the mid-1970s, the UK economy was slowing down, inflation was high, and there was a lot of industrial change happening. And I can imagine people within academia and within government going, do you know what? We need to do something that changes the discussion, changes the paradigm. And it was a combination of academics, and it was called the Science Research Council then, and the Department of Industry in 1975 launched something called the Teaching Company Scheme, which has now become Knowledge Transfer Partnerships. And the idea is to, and always has been, to take the brilliant research that's done in universities and embed it in a business to test the practical application of that research. But interestingly, it took the model from the teaching hospitals that were in the UK at the time, where medics spend a certain amount of time in the classroom learning, and then they go into a teaching hospital to apply what they've learned and take that knowledge and put it into a real setting. And that's the model that KTP has always used, to take the knowledge from the university and embed it in a business where the business can make some use of it. And I think that's really exciting, and that's what's different. The other thing that's really different, and this is sometimes challenging for some of our academic colleagues to get their head around, is that KTP solves a challenge for the business. It will help them further their research, but its intent isn't to do that. The intent is to solve a business challenge with research that's already been done. And that's turning the ethos of a lot of what happens in universities completely around. Now, to say that was happening 50 years ago was groundbreaking, and it's still groundbreaking now. And in the UK, we're seeing that there is a growing recognition of the value of industry and academic partnerships, and that more funding is at research level is becoming entwined with having an industry partner, or benefits from having an industry partner. So 50 years ago, to be thinking along those lines was pretty special. And that old The old sort of analogy of standing on the shoulders of giants, you feel that very acutely when you look back at 50 years of KTP history. And the people who came up with this, they came up with such a good model, they would still recognize it today. The core of it hasn't changed. How we deliver it, massively different.
Hmm.
The sorts of projects that we do now, massively different. It used to be very focused on engineering and SMEs. Lots have changed, but that core partnership that brings a business together, a university academic team together. We use the phrase an associate and a graduate who is put in place to act as the bridge between those two worlds and take the knowledge from the university team into the business, but also pass information from the business back to the university. So it becomes a very symbiotic relationship if it's done.
That's great, actually, that you bring up the associate because I wanted to touch a bit on that because I also find that quite an interesting and unique aspect of
Mm.
the of KTPs. This notion of an associate acting as a bridge, so it has an element as well. In addition to being that connector, there's some kind of capability building lens to it as well. So I'm curious if to hear a bit more about what role does that embedded person play and how does it impact the dynamics of the collaboration?
I've noticed some of our UK colleagues have joined the call, so I hope they would agree with me that finding a good associate is absolutely key to the success of a KTP project. And we are very fortunate in that we seem to have global reach. We have a huge number of people coming to the UK to participate in the KTP program. That means we're attracting some of the best talent globally to work on these thorny problems, these applied problems. That's worth thinking about in the bigger scheme of things. Yeah. Why are they wanting to come to the UK to do this? It's not an easy job, but it is hugely rewarding if it's done right. The other thing, and I say this a lot to our UK colleagues, the scariest 2 days of my year are the KTP Associates Conference, when we get 150 of our associates together. The energy in the room is off the charts. They are insightful, thoughtful, challenging, curious. They are an incredible group of individuals who are going to be future leaders or future academic leaders. And we are very fortunate that we've got them coming to us to say they want to work in KTP, that we have these amazing academics that, conjure these projects out of thin air and businesses that are willing to work with them. Because for the business, it's a real risk quite often. Many of them have never done an academic partnership like this. And we go, oh, we'll just drop a graduate in. It's fine. Don't worry about it. So it really does rely on the quality of that individual. They sit between both worlds and they have to understand the academic research because that's what they're going to try and apply in the business. But they're going to try and apply it in a way that is conducive with business operations. There's no point trying to hammer a square peg into a round hole that won't fit. So you have to know your research really well, but you also have to know the business. It's really interesting and it's repeated time and time again that in the first management meeting that you have the project, that the associate can appear quite timid. They're getting their head around all of the different aspects of the project and the relationships, often either sometimes moving to a new country, often moving to a new town or a new city. And there's a lot going on. But if I go back a year or 2 years later to join one of the meetings, oh my goodness, these associates, they've taken control. They have the ear of the academics, a direct line, if you like, into the university. And the academics are really keen to hear what's going on in the business and how their work is being implemented, but also what are the other problems they're encountering. So they're feeding all of that useful information back to the academics, but then they're taking all of that academic information, they're learning how the business works, and they are molding this lump of clay, this information that they have into something that fits for the business. And that is what is special about KTP. Sometimes we talk about, oh, is it consultancy or is it KTP? A consultant, paraphrasing a little bit, But consultants like to give you something that they've already made, and they might change the color or the label of something, and they'll go, here you go, this is what you need to do. And they know it works. They've tried and tested it a number of times before. KTP is absolutely bespoke, and the solution will fit that business, and it might not fit any other business.
Yeah.
And that's the difference. And that's why you need a great associate to sit in the middle of this whirlwind of activity. Because at a business level, the KTP won't be the only thing that's happening. The business will still be operating. You're doing a strategically important project for the business, but the business is still making and selling things, and that has to carry on as well as you're doing as well as this new project being done. So it's fascinating, and the associates are incredible.
Yeah, really interesting kind of to think about that role because as you said, it's you need to of course have the technical know-how and understanding, but you obviously need other characteristics to enable you to really operate on both sides and be the engine for that
Yeah,
partnership.
there's something else perhaps to say here as well, that in terms of the qualities that we'd look for in an associate, it's not always the best, the most academically gifted
Hmm.
that we're looking for. It will be the people who can communicate. And that's a really underrated skill within the academic world, even to the point that some of our academics want to do the training that our associates do. But it is being able to communicate and engage with other people. That's at the heart of what the associate does.
If we build on that, kind of you talked about the importance of the associate, but if we think about you in your time, you really oversee a portfolio of what, hundreds of collaborations across the UK. What would you say differentiates a successful or an impactful KTP from one that maybe it's, they come together, they do for the duration of the funding and then it fizzles and dissolves. So I'm
Yeah.
curious what leads to more successful longer term partnerships and what maybe makes them break down or yeah, not continue.
Well, we're a little bit naughty. We make the application process quite difficult because the theory is if you can't put a good application together, that might take you 3 or 6 months to pull an application together. But if you can't do that, you won't be able to survive working 2 or 3 years together in a partnership. So the application form is deliberately challenging. The benefit of doing it that way, though, is that we reach a decision very quickly. So we don't keep people hanging around. So there is a little trade-off there. It's not completely one-sided. But when you look at the great partnerships versus the good ones, again, if I tend to get taken to see the great ones, and I'm sat around a table with this group of people, and they're telling me about the project, and I know it's a great project if I can't tell who are the academics, who's from the business, and who's the associate, because they have created this integrated partnership, this team of people who can deliver a project, who understand each other's challenges, are willing to listen and work together, who are absolutely engaged in solving this problem. And it's marvelous to see, it really is. In terms of what you might say, well, what does success look like if you've got this team? And it's really hard to say. For some, it can be about the cultural shift that's happening within the business. That can be the most important thing. So take a typical SME, a family business that's good at what it does, but the competition's catching up or overtaking it. Going through the KTP process can help them learn how to innovate and can put fire in their bellies to
Hmm.
continue on that innovation journey. When they set up the business, they created a great product and they need to go through that process again, but it's more difficult now because you've got all these other things going on with running a business. Sometimes it's about a cultural shift. There's always an economic imperative because Innovate requires that we contribute back to the UK economy. So every project has to at least cover its costs in the returns that we get, but that can be quite modest. However, sometimes that can be quite significant too. It isn't always a financial return that makes a project successful. It can be other things too, and that cultural shift.
Hmm.
Particularly, we've done a strand of competition called management KTPs, which have been looking at strengthening management practice within businesses, and that's where that particular thing comes out very
Yeah.
strongly. That sometimes you need to be a better manager. It's not just about developing a better product, but you need better management practices throughout your businesses. So yeah, it can be quite interesting in that way.
Do you see many of those collaborations continuing, coming back for more,
Oh,
doing more
yeah.
together?
Absolutely, absolutely. Something like 80% of projects say that they want to collaborate further once the project's finished.
Hmm.
That can take many forms. Sometimes it's they do a PhD with the university that they've been working with, or they offer student placements or something like that. What we like to see within the program is after a year or two, so the project that's completed has had a little bit of time to embed, and then maybe the business comes back with sort of follow-on projects like building on what we've done, we want to do this now, or something that has arisen and we've done this project and we've seen an opportunity over here and we need some help moving in a particular direction. So it's that collaboration that's really important. And I think that's the biggest win for a good project.
Hmm.
There's some really strong evidence about the importance of that. There was an engineering company in Sheffield in the north of England who made roll bars for heavy goods vehicles. And you make them in Sheffield, ship them somewhere else in Europe, and it all gets screwed together, and you end up with a truck. As part of the quality control process at the factory where they're building the trucks, they've recognized there was an issue with these roll bars. Picked up the phone. The business didn't understand what had caused the issue. So they picked up the phone to their friends in their local
Hmm.
university that they'd done a KTP with. And because they have a relationship, they were able to, okay, we can look into this for you. We've got an electron microscope that might be helpful to analyze one of these roll bars. And as it turns out, it's become an exemplar from this manufacturer, not of how to deal with a product query, but it's recognized by the HGV manufacturer as the best way to deal with problems. So
Hmm.
rather than it being an issue, it's become something. It's actually become sort of an advantage that they've got a
Yeah.
university that they can pick up the phone to and go, "Hello, we've got a problem. Can you help?"
Which is great and how it should be, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
having the relationship and then reaching out to each other rather than only reaching out because I need a partner for a grant I'm applying
Yeah.
for.
And that, do you know, when I talk to universities, that's what they want. They want businesses to pick up the phone, to
Yeah.
talk to them and say, hey, we've got a problem, we've got a challenge, can you help us? But I think businesses can find universities quite impenetrable.
Mm.
And that universities do their best, I know they do, to try and help people navigate. But from the outside looking in, it's like, who do I ring? Who do I
Yeah.
contact?
Yeah.
So
So having those
having
contacts.
yeah. So
Yeah.
through KTP is brilliant. And I'm just having a look at the other notes that I've made about this, because I think one of the other things that we do, it comes out in our evaluation reports, which if anyone's interested on the UKRI website, Google UKRI KTP evaluation, it will come up. But we do a lot of reporting at the end of the project. We get a lot of information back about how the project has been. So we grade all of our projects, and a significant number get the top grade or the next
Hmm.
grade down. And we celebrate that through our awards each year. There's always that feedback as well. So we celebrate our high performing
Yeah.
ships whenever we can. But that doesn't mean, if you're not a KTP award winner, that your project, no, good, absolutely. You can still achieve a massive amount of transformation within a business on a K2
Hmm.
that is just good. It's just that there are those exceptional ones.
The UIIN Conference 2026, where universities, industry, and innovators meet to shape the future. Join us in Stockholm for 3 days of insight, inspiration, and impact. Hear from global thought leaders, expand your network, and be part of the conversations driving collaboration forward. Secure your place now at uiin.org/conference.
Richard, if I reflect back on what we started with, talking about how you said back in the 70s, there was already this clear need and understanding of the importance of businesses and academia working together and reflecting on how things have changed over the last 50 years. And maybe want to contextualize that a little bit with the UK environment. So KTP, it's part of a broader innovation ecosystem and infrastructure. So I have two angles to my question. How important do you find that wider ecosystem to KTP's effectiveness? And what have been some of those maybe changes over the last several years, maybe in how collaboration models have evolved that you have seen that also play a role to helping KTP's effectiveness and impact?
Okay, so where do we sit within the innovation ecosystem? We initially, I look at what's around me in Innovate, and there are various other programs in Innovate, but none of them really address the same space that we work in, which is academic business partnerships. So we're unique in that regard. But Innovate supports several networks. One is called Innovate UK Business Growth, and we often refer our KTP businesses to them at the end of a KTP, so they get some support, and it's like, where are you going next? Do you need finance? Do you need help with something else, access to markets? And business growth can often help with that. At the start of a KTP, there's another organisation which is Innovate UK Business Connect. And quite often, occasionally, that's the route through which a KTP will come in. But within Business Connect, there are teams of people organised around thematic groups, and they can signpost businesses to KTP as a mechanism. So that is quite an important process for that signposting takes place. And we don't mind who does that as long as business finds its way to us eventually. Yeah. And after that, it starts getting really messy. I think every country that I've looked at, their ecosystem, particularly around business innovation, is complex, and it's difficult for businesses to navigate. So finding those support organizations like this one, or whether they're your local chamber of commerce or something of that nature that can help guide you, are really important, because I don't think anyone really knows what the whole ecosystem looks like. Yeah. Certainly not in the country, not across Europe and globally. Oh my goodness. But every ecosystem is the same, and it's well-meaning. It's just finding your way through it. As a business, it's bewildering. I don't know how people do it. There are tools on the Innovate website that can help filter some of the various different offers, both from within Innovate and in UKRI and others. So there are tools out there that you can find, but it is really challenging. And be honest, KTP is often described as the best kept business secret in the UK. There are somewhere in the region of 6 million small to medium-sized enterprises in the UK. We can fund 350 projects a year. There's a massive discrepancy there, which is why we can be hard to find. And the model's no good or anything like that. It just means that we recognise the that we have.
You need awareness and visibility for the different businesses as well.
Yeah, but I think that's a challenge that every country has. How do you support the vast number of businesses? And what we want to do in KTP is support the ones that are ready to innovate, the ones that come forward with a great idea and a good business case. And, we help with that. We have our advisors, our knowledge transfer advisors, who sit within Innovate UK Business Connect, who, along with our university partners, support the development of projects and help shape them into something that is hopefully going to be amazing. Give them the best chance at the start and keep our fingers crossed. And in terms of collaboration models, that support that we give, or that the applicants get through their university partner and through our knowledge transfer advisors, is special. It is uncommon, I would say. There's lots of people who will tell you they can write a good application, but writing a KTP application well takes a particular perspective, because it's about knowledge exchange. And what we're looking for at the end of the project is the businesses embedded that knowledge, not just got it sat on a shelf somewhere. They actually understand what they've got and are able to take that forwards. That sort of doesn't quite, I know it talks a little bit about collaboration models, but we've not found many other models around the world that can do what KTP does, or do it at the scale we do it at. At the moment, we've got 830 live projects. So, that's quite big. That's a portfolio somewhere in the region of £120 million that Innovate is investing into those projects, along with a similar amount from the businesses, it has to be said. But the return on that will be 5 to 1 on the investment.
Exactly.
So it's worthwhile.
Richard, I'm conscious of time, and I really want to ask, there's a question actually that just came through the chat, which ties into what I also wanted to ask you. We're talking about KTP, and it's a funding mechanism and partnership scheme in the UK. If, let's say, another country, so in this case, there was an attendee from Norway, if your countries are exploring to develop a similar type of program in their context, of course, without going into details about different ecosystems, what would you say would need to happen beyond just taking the model as it is and just adopting it? What would you say countries need to consider to implement such a scheme?
Couple of things. First of all, how you fund it, where the money's coming from, and what your funder wants. That's key. But that's really separate to how the KTP model itself works. As long as you don't mess with that triple helix, it's sometimes called, of the associate, the business, and the academic, the funding doesn't matter quite so much. What a lot of countries have missed in the countries we've worked with is the role of the knowledge transfer advisor. They are my eyes and ears on every project. There are about 40, I think there's 42 of them now across the UK. They all have a portfolio of between 15 and 30-ish projects, depending on areas and time that they work. But they are incredible in that their role is to try to ensure the success of the project. They're not incentivized to push things through. It's just good old-fashioned, how can we help? And that is absolutely key to the success of KTP. So if you're thinking about a model, absolutely think about the support that goes along with it. And if you want to come and talk to us, drop me a line on LinkedIn or contact Innovate UK through customer service and they'll connect you and let's have a chat. Regarding Norway, we've already spoken to people from the University of Oslo about a KTP program. Maybe we can connect you up. I'd have to go back to my notes and see who we spoke to because it was about, I don't know, 18 months ago. But we often get this, that different people from around a university or in a country start contacting us. And if we can act as the mechanism to pull them together, then you can create a program either within your university or, as they've done in Sweden, they started off at a university and now they went regional and now working nationally too. Who knows? The sky's the limit. But we're here to help if we can. And we're very happy to have a chat with people.
That's great, Richard. Thanks a lot for that. And as we were talking about offline, using these types of communities like ours as an opportunity to also talk about these topics and share insights and good practice. So thank you very much for joining us and for sharing your knowledge, also your passion about the topic and the impact that it has. It's very clear. So thanks, Richard, for your time with us today.
It's an absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And thanks to everyone who joined us and listened in and also asked some questions. And Richard, because you mentioned Sweden, I have to say that our annual conference is taking place in June in Stockholm, which is also a great opportunity to connect and talk about broader topics around partnerships and innovation. So join us there. And with that,
I'll be booking my ticket later.
Yeah, great to hear. I'd say thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. And I wish you all a great rest of the day.
Thanks very much, everyone.
Thank you for listening to today's discussion. Follow UIIN on LinkedIn. And if you're enjoying our podcast, make sure to subscribe, rate, and review in your podcast platform of choice to help other people find this content too.